The crisp morning air had brought a sense of peace to Alex Hayes's quiet suburban street, a gentle hum of birdsong and the distant rumble of the daily commute. But not today. Today, the peace was shattered by a single, innocuous-looking piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper of Alex's meticulously maintained classic pickup truck. It wasn't a parking ticket, though its official, stark black and white print carried a similar weight of bureaucratic authority. It was from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, a name Alex had come to associate less with community spirit and more with unsolicited demands about lawn height and acceptable mailbox designs. The letter, stiff and unyielding, declared in no uncertain terms that Alex's driveway, specifically the section nearest the street, was in violation of a newly enacted, vaguely worded common area access clause. It stated that due to aesthetic inconsistencies and potential obstruction of community views, an immediate, non-negotiable modification was required, or fines would commence. Alex stared at the offending document, a slow burn of disbelief spreading through their chest. This wasn't some overgrown hedge or a road garden gnome. This was their driveway, a stretch of asphalt that had served their property and previous owners without incident for decades. It was wider than most in the neighborhood, a little less manicured, perhaps, but it had always been perfectly functional, designed for easy access, almost as if it was meant for something more than just a single car. That thought, fleeting and half-formed, was quickly drowned out by the rising tide of indignation. Alex had bought the property 3 years ago, drawn to its slightly larger lot size and the charming, if somewhat quirky, architectural style of the house. The driveway had always been a unique feature, broader than necessary for a single-family home, gently sloping down from the main road to a 2-car garage. It felt substantial, a true thoroughfare, not just a residential path. Now, the HOA, represented by the perpetually disapproving glares of Mrs. Henderson from number 14 and the officious emails of Mr. Peterson, the HOA president, wanted to dictate its very dimensions. Potential obstruction of community views, Alex muttered, crumpling the paper slightly. Whose views? The only thing it obstructed was the perfectly manicured lawn of the vacant lot across the street, which ironically, the HOA insisted on keeping perfectly pristine. This wasn't about aesthetics. This felt personal, an assertion of power over the last bastion of personal property rights in a community increasingly choked by regulations. Alex walked the length of their driveway, feeling its solid, purposeful construction underfoot. It wasn't just asphalt. It had a particular kind of reinforced edge, almost like a miniature curb designed to withstand heavy use. A strange thought pricked at their mind. During the last big regional storm, when the main roads were choked, a few emergency vehicles had actually used their driveway as a temporary turnaround point, a quick pivot before heading back towards the highway entrance that was less than a quarter-mile away. They hadn't given it much thought at the time, seeing it as just a convenient spot. But now, a flicker of something unsettled in their gut. The following days brought a flurry of increasingly aggressive communication from the HOA. Fines began to accrue, first minor, then escalating, each email signed by Mr. Peterson, whose tone became progressively colder. Alex tried calling the HOA office, a number that always seemed to go straight to voicemail. They even tried catching Mrs. Henderson outside, hoping for a neighborly chat, but she merely sniffed and hurried away. This wasn't just a minor dispute, it was a siege. They want me to rebuild my own driveway, Alex thought, pacing their living room, the fine notices spread across the coffee table like a losing hand of cards. To narrow it, to realign it to their new standards, it's ridiculous. The anger was now mixed with a simmering curiosity. Why this driveway? Why now? There were other driveways on the street that were wider, or angled more awkwardly. It almost felt targeted. A memory resurfaced from when Alex first bought the house. The real estate agent, a jovial man named Frank, had made an offhand comment. During the walk-through, "This place has a bit of history." you know, used to be part of a larger estate, and this driveway here, it's seen a lot. Built like a brick outhouse, designed to handle anything. They don't make 'em like this anymore. At the time, Alex had simply nodded, appreciating the sturdy construction. Now, Frank's words echoed with an unexpected significance, a subtle hint that this stretch of concrete, far from being an ordinary residential access point, held a secret, a purpose far grander and more critical than the HOA could possibly imagine. The conflict was no longer just about property lines. It was about an unseen legacy, a dormant power that the HOA, in its myopic quest for aesthetic conformity, was about to unwittingly awaken. The fines from the Willow Creek HOA were no longer just an annoyance. They were a financial assault. Each new email from Mr. Peterson arrived with a colder, more insistent tone, demanding immediate compliance and threatening legal action, even a lien on the property, if the driveway modifications weren't initiated within the week. "This is insane," Alex muttered, scrolling through another HOA notification that seemed to radiate smug authority. "They're acting like I'm building a multi-story parking garage, not just using my own property." The initial frustration had curdled into a steely resolve. Alex wasn't just annoyed anymore. They were determined to understand why this specific driveway, their driveway, had become the HOA's latest obsession. The answer, Alex intuitively felt, lay not in the HOA's vaguely worded aesthetic clauses, but somewhere deeper, hidden within the property's history. The living room, once a sanctuary of quiet comfort, transformed into a makeshift war room. Stacks of old property deeds, printouts from county planning department websites, and historicals owning maps began to pile up on the coffee table. Alex spent hours hunched over a laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating a furrowed brow. The initial searches were generic: Willow Creek HOA rules, property line disputes, driveway regulations. They yielded nothing beyond the typical suburban red tape. But the persistent thought of the driveway's unusual width, its robust construction, and Frank the realtor's cryptic comment kept nagging at them. "Designed to handle anything," he'd said. "Anything?" Alex shifted their search terms, adding words like historical infrastructure, old road easements, emergency access points, and federal designations. It was like sifting through mountains of sand for a single, elusive grain of gold. Days bled into nights. Alex devoured online archives of local newspapers from decades past, cross-referenced old county planning commission minutes, and even dug out geological surveys of the area, convinced that there was a piece of the puzzle missing. The HOA, meanwhile, remained relentless. A registered letter arrived, threatening a court injunction to force compliance. The stress was palpable, a constant knot in Alex's stomach. But with each dead end, the determination only grew. They recalled the emergency vehicles that had briefly used their driveway during the last storm. It had been a fleeting observation then, but now it felt like a crucial clue, a breadcrumb leading down an unforeseen path. Why their driveway and not the cul-de-sac at the end of the street? It was too direct, too convenient to be random. Then, late one evening, fueled by stale coffee and a stubborn refusal to give up, Alex hit a different kind of search term: the original land grants for the Willow Creek development, tracing back to the mid-20th century. Deep within a digitized county archive, buried beneath layers of dry legal jargon and land survey notations, a specific detail jumped out. A footnote, barely legible in the grainy scan, referenced a right-of-way granted to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, during the Cold War era. FEMA? Why FEMA? Alex's heart began to pound with a frantic rhythm. This wasn't about a property line anymore. This was something far, far bigger. Digging further, cross-referencing names and dates from the land grant, Alex uncovered an official, federally mandated document, a yellowed blueprint from the 1960s, stamped with classified, but now declassified, and there it was, stark and undeniable, a dotted line, cutting straight through what was now the Willow Creek development, clearly labeling a specific stretch of road, including the exact location of Alex's driveway, as a designated emergency evacuation route. Sector Alpha. The revelation hit Alex like a physical blow, simultaneously electrifying and terrifying. Their driveway wasn't just a driveway, it was part of a critical national infrastructure, a lifeline intended to provide emergency access and egress during a major regional disaster, a path specifically widened and reinforced to handle heavy traffic and emergency vehicles. The subtle hints, the unusual width, the robust construction, the emergency vehicles, all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't some minor local zoning anomaly. This was a direct federal designation, a secret embedded in the very foundations of the community, long forgotten by generations of property owners and, evidently, by the very HOA that governed it. Alex leaned back in the chair, a slow, disbelieving laugh escaping their lips. The sheer absurdity of it all was staggering. The Willow Creek HOA, in its petty, hyper-focused pursuit of aesthetic uniformity and control, was attempting to restrict access to a federally designated emergency evacuation route. They were fining, threatening, and potentially trying to legally alter a vital piece of national emergency infrastructure, completely oblivious to its true purpose. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Alex could almost see Mrs. Henderson's jaw drop, Mr. Peterson's face drain of color, when they finally realized the colossal mistake they were making. That was the interesting loop that snapped into place. The audience was now fully aware of the ticking time bomb the HOA was sitting on, and the delicious suspense lay in waiting for the inevitable explosion. Alex picked up the crumpled HOA letter again, but this time, a slow, triumphant smile spread across their face. The battle lines had just been redrawn, and the HOA was about to walk into a fight they couldn't possibly win. The Willow Creek HOA's monthly board meeting was usually a sparsely attended affair, a predictable drone of budget reports and trivial complaints about dog walkers. But not this Tuesday. Tonight, the small community hall was packed, buzzing with a tense, expectant energy. Word had spread, distorted through the neighborhood grapevine, that Alex from number 7 was bringing something big to the table regarding the driveway dispute. Alex walked in, a slim but heavy briefcase clutched in their hand, feeling every eye in the room on them. Mr. Peterson, seated at the head of the long table, cleared his throat, a theatrical gesture designed to assert authority. Mrs. Henderson, beside him, offered a chillingly polite, almost triumphant, smile. Mr. Hayes, Peterson began, his voice dripping with condescension. We understand you have something to discuss regarding your outstanding fines and the required modifications to your property. We hope you've come prepared to outline your plan for compliance. Alex took a deep breath, the weight of the evidence in their briefcase providing a calm resolve. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I have indeed come prepared. Not to discuss compliance, but to clarify a rather significant misunderstanding. Alex opened the briefcase, pulling out meticulously organized documents, the declassified federal blueprint, copies of the original land grant, and official correspondence from the 1960s. They walked to the small projector stand, connecting their laptop, and the grainy, yet undeniable, image of the designated emergency evacuation route. Sector Alpha blueprint filled the screen behind the bewildered HOA board. A murmur rippled through the room. As you can see, Alex stated, their voice clear and steady, my driveway, this specific section you're demanding I alter, is not merely a residential access point. It is, and always has been, a federally designated emergency evacuation route. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with disbelief. Mr. Peterson's face, usually a mask of smug authority, slackened. Mrs. Henderson's triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter shock. Other board members exchanged confused glances. That's preposterous, Mr. Hayes, Peterson stammered, recovering slightly, his voice wavering. That's an old document, a mistake. Surely. It can't possibly be relevant to current HOA bylaws. Alex calmly clicked to the next slide, displaying a more recent, digitally scanned map from the Department of Transportation, updated within the last decade, clearly showing the same route, marked with the same designation. It's not a mistake, Mr. Peterson, and it is very much relevant. This route is part of a national contingency plan for rapid evacuation and emergency vehicle access in the event of a regional disaster. Interfering with it is not just a breach of HOA rules, which, ironically, these federal designations supersede. It's a violation of federal law. The room erupted. Whispers turned into excited murmurs. Neighbors leaned forward, eyes wide with astonishment. Peterson, however, seemed to dig his heels in deeper, his face reddening with a combination of embarrassment and fury. "This is simply a scare tactic, Mr. Hayes," he declared, his voice rising. "An attempt to circumvent your responsibilities. As a homeowner, we consulted our legal team. They found no such federal designation impacting your property." Alex held up another document, a letter from a prominent law firm specializing in federal land rights, explicitly detailing the legal implications for any entity obstructing such a route, along with a polite but firm inquiry to the HOA regarding their recent actions. "Perhaps your legal team didn't look hard enough, Mr. Peterson," Alex retorted, a hint of steel in their voice. "Or perhaps they weren't aware of what to look for. I've initiated contact with FEMA. I've also formally notified the County Emergency Management Office and the State Department of Transportation. They are, shall we say, very interested in this matter." The interesting loop was now twisting tighter. The HOAS continued, almost willful, ignorance becoming increasingly apparent and absurd to everyone present. The audience could see the train wreck coming, even if Peterson and Henderson seemed hell-bent on staying on the tracks. Mrs. Henderson, regaining some composure, scoffed. "Federal agencies. This is a local HOA, Mr. Hayes. We manage lawns and paint colors, not national security. You're making a mountain out of a molehill to avoid a simple driveway repair." Her dismissal, however, felt hollow, lacking conviction. The gravity of the documents on the screen, the mention of FEMA, hung in the air, undeniable. Alex then displayed a satellite image overlay, showing how the designated route seamlessly connected to major highways on one end and critical community infrastructure on the other, and how their wide driveway was an integral, non-negotiable link in that chain. The sheer scale of what the HOA had attempted to disrupt was becoming terrifyingly clear to everyone, except perhaps the most entrenched members of the board. The meeting devolved into chaos. Neighbors were openly discussing the implications, some expressing shock, others a quiet admiration for Alex's tenacious research. Peterson pounded his gavel, demanding order, but his authority had visibly eroded. He called for a quick executive session with the board members, retreating to a back room, their whispers and angry exclamations faintly audible through the thin walls. When they emerged, their faces were pale, their posture stiff. "The board will review this information," Peterson announced, avoiding eye contact with Alex. "We will consult with additional legal counsel. For now, all actions regarding Mr. Hayes' driveway are suspended." It wasn't an admission of guilt, not yet. It was a retreat, a temporary reprieve. But the battle was far from over. Alex knew this was just the beginning. The HOA was still operating under a fundamental delusion, blinded by its own sense of petty power. They couldn't, or wouldn't, grasp the true magnitude of what they had challenged. And soon, the wider world, beyond the confines of Willow Creek, would come knocking. The brief, uncomfortable truce following the HOA meeting quickly evaporated. Within days, the polite inquiries Alex had made to federal and state agencies escalated into formal investigations. First came the letter, crisp and official, from the Department of Homeland Security, followed swiftly by one from FEMA, both addressed to the Willow Creek HOA. citing potential obstruction of a federally designated emergency evacuation corridor and demanding immediate cessation of all restrictive actions against Alex's property. Mr. Peterson, in a desperate attempt to regain control, called an emergency HOA board meeting, but it was clear his authority was crumbling. The other board members, their faces etched with panic, looked less like community leaders and more like deer caught in headlights. "This is insane. They can't just barge in here." Mrs. Henderson shrieked, clutching her pearls as if they were the last vestiges of her crumbling world. But they could. And they were. The initial phone calls to the HOA office started discreetly, from low-level federal agents seeking clarification. These soon progressed to on-site visits. Uniformed FEMA officials, accompanied by engineers from the Department of Transportation, were seen walking the length of Alex's driveway, clipboards in hand, meticulously documenting its dimensions and connection to the larger infrastructure. They didn't speak to Alex much, just polite nods, their presence alone a silent, powerful indictment of the HOA's blunder. The interesting loop was now twisting mercilessly. The HOA, so arrogant in their small-scale authority, was now facing the full, unyielding might of federal bureaucracy, a force they neither understood nor could possibly fight. Their attempts to deflect, to claim ignorance, to even blame Alex for causing trouble, were met with the calm, unwavering recitation of federal statutes and public safety regulations. Word of the federal presence spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. Whispers turned to open conversations at the community park, then to heated debates on the neighborhood's online forums. "Can you believe this? They tried to block an evacuation route." One post read. "This is what happens when busybodies get too much power." Another declared. Opinions were sharply divided. Some staunchly defended the HOA, accusing Alex of being a troublemaker, unpatriotic even, for bringing outsiders into a local matter, but a growing majority, alarmed by the implications for their own safety and property values, rallied behind Alex, their quiet murmurs of support turning into a public outcry against the HOA's disastrous overreach. Local news stations picked up on the story. A reporter from Channel 8, armed with a microphone and a cameraman, staked out the entrance to Willow Creek, eager for a soundbite from anyone willing to comment. Mr. Peterson, caught off guard emerging from the HOA office, stammered through an awkward non-denial before retreating into his car. The image, broadcast on the evening news, was less an interview and more a public capitulation. The HOA, once so confident, was now publicly humiliated, their incompetence exposed for all to see. Then came the incident. It was a Tuesday afternoon, an unusually hot day in late spring. A brush fire, ignited by a careless discarded cigarette butt, erupted in the dry hills bordering Willow Creek. Not a massive conflagration, but significant enough to trigger a localized evacuation order for the section of the neighborhood furthest from the main road. Suddenly, the entire community's attention snapped into terrifying focus on Sector Alpha. The main road was quickly overwhelmed by panicked residents trying to leave, creating gridlock. Emergency services, including fire trucks and paramedics, found their usual routes clogged. That's when the radio calls started, desperate and urgent, directing fire engines to utilize the designated alternate ingress point through Willow Creek, Sector Alpha access, but the concrete barriers the HOA had secretly placed at the end of Alex's driveway, a final defiant act of restriction after the board meeting, stood in the way. The fire truck, lights flashing and sirens wailing, screeched to a halt, its path completely blocked. Panic surged through the crowd of evacuated residents, watching from a safe distance. Alex, who had been monitoring the situation from their porch, raced out, shouting, "It's a federal route, they've blocked it." The sight of the huge fire engine unable to pass, the smoke billowing ominously from the hills, was the devastating culmination of the interesting loop. The HOA's petty, power-hungry decision had just put lives at risk. A news helicopter, already hovering overhead, captured the entire scene: the blocked fire truck, the frantic firefighters, and the bewildered residents. The footage, played repeatedly on every local news channel, was undeniable. It wasn't just Alex's driveway anymore. It was a matter of public safety, a catastrophic failure of judgment by the Willow Creek HOA. The phone calls to the HOA office turned from inquiries to outright threats from enraged homeowners. Mr. Peterson's voicemail was full. Mrs. Henderson was seen hurriedly packing a suitcase into her car. The public outcry was deafening. Federal agencies, now with irrefutable proof of obstruction during an actual emergency, moved swiftly. A formal cease and desist order, backed by federal marshals, was hand-delivered to the HOA board members. Fines, no longer measured in hundreds, but in tens of thousands of dollars per day, began to accrue. There were whispers of criminal negligence investigations. The HOA's carefully constructed facade of authority had crumbled, replaced by public scorn and legal jeopardy. The residents of Willow Creek, once divided, were now largely united in their condemnation, demanding immediate change. The full extent of the HOA's colossal blunder had been laid bare for the world to see, and the consequences were just beginning to truly sink in. The emergency HOA meeting, called 3 days after the brush fire incident, was unlike any before. It, no longer confined to the small community hall, it was held in the much larger school gymnasium, barely containing the hundreds of furious Willow Creek residents. The air crackled with palpable tension, a blend of anger, fear, and a burning desire for accountability. Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Henderson, flanked by 2 stone-faced lawyers, looked like prisoners awaiting judgment, their usual composure shattered. The very notion of their authority now seemed a cruel joke. Federal agents, visible but unobtrusive, sat in the front rows, their presence a silent reminder of the sword of Damocles hanging over the HOA's head. Alex sat quietly among the residents, not seeking the spotlight, but simply observing the inevitable unfolding of justice. The meeting began with a terse statement from one of the HOA's lawyers, confirming the receipt of federal directives, hefty fines, and the potential for criminal negligence charges stemming from the obstruction of the emergency evacuation route. He then announced the immediate, forced resignation of Mr. Peterson as HOA president, effective immediately, citing a clause in the HOA's own bylaws regarding gross misconduct. A ripple of triumphant applause swept through the gymnasium. Mrs. Henderson, seeing the writing on the wall, mumbled her resignation as well, looking as though she might dissolve into the floorboards at any moment. The other board members, a mix of relief and terror on their faces, quickly voted to accept both resignations. The HOA, as it had been known, was finally decapitated. The remaining board members, humbled and shaken, then made a series of unprecedented concessions. All past fines issued to Alex were not only rescinded but publicly apologized for. The HOA would bear the full cost of removing any self-imposed barriers on the driveway. More significantly, they committed to working directly with federal and state authorities to ensure the clear and permanent demarcation of the emergency evacuation route, including educational programs for residents. It was a complete capitulation, born not of newfound enlightenment, but of overwhelming legal and financial pressure. The interesting loop had finally closed, leaving the HOA in ruins, their petty tyranny brought down by the very federal power they had so foolishly disregarded. In the weeks that followed, Willow Creek underwent a quiet, yet profound transformation. New HOA leadership was elected, promising transparency and a focus on genuine community welfare for petty regulations. The controversial segment of Alex's driveway was officially recognized by the HOA as part of the federally designated route. Bright, reflective signage, installed by the county, now clearly marked the route's path, including Alex's property. During a brief ceremony attended by local officials and even a FEMA representative, the signs were unveiled, turning Alex's previously contentious driveway into a symbol of public safety and a testament to an individual's fight against bureaucratic overreach. Alex felt a profound sense of relief, but also a quiet exhaustion. The victory was sweet, but the battle had been draining. Looking at their driveway now, clearly marked and respected, it felt different. It was no longer just a path to their garage. It was a small but vital thread in a much larger tapestry of national safety. The ordeal had changed Alex. They were no longer the quiet homeowner content to let things be. They had learned the power of diligence, of digging deeper, and of standing firm against injustice. No matter how small it seemed at first, they understood that sometimes the seemingly insignificant details held the most profound truths. The lasting impact on the community was clear. The residents of Willow Creek were more engaged, more aware, and far more vocal. They scrutinized HOA decisions more closely, demanding accountability and questioning rules that seemed arbitrary. The incident served as a stark reminder that true community well-being often transcended superficial appearances and demanded a respect for larger, unseen necessities. The phrase federally designated emergency evacuation route became a common, almost legendary, whisper in Willow Creek, a cautionary tale told to new homeowners about the consequences of unchecked power. As for Alex, life slowly returned to a semblance of normal. The fines were gone, the threats had ceased. But the driveway remained a silent monument to the conflict, a permanent reminder of the day a small HOA tried to block a federal lifeline. Every time Alex pulled out, or saw a neighbor glance at the new signage, there was a quiet sense of pride. It wasn't just their driveway anymore, it was the driveway, a public service, a symbol. And in that, there was a deep, satisfying peace. The battle was over, the reckoning complete, and from the ashes of petty squabbles, a new dawn of awareness and responsibility had truly broken in Willow Creek.